is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our Thursday program here. Quick apologies to our commercial affiliates. Apparently, somebody new over at Westwood One pushed the wrong button, and for the first hour of our program, they played yesterday's show. While we were doing a live show here in Portland, it didn't get to you. So, I did this long rant about how this federal judge yesterday is working to rig the 2024 election, and and a thing about Moms for Liberty and whatnot. And we can talk about that as the day goes on. But right now, on the line with us is our buddy Phil Ittner. He's the veteran war correspondent based in Kyiv, Ukraine. He's got a video blog over on YouTube that is must-watch stuff, and you can just find it with his name. It's spelled it's 6 letters in each name, Philipittner, and that's also how he spells his Twitter handle if you want to talk to him on Twitter. Phil, welcome back to the program. First off, how are you? How is Kyiv, and how's the counteroffensive going?
In a word, hot, and that's how things are here in Kiev. As far as the counteroffensive is going, again, I wouldn't want to be a soldier fighting in this heat. We're currently going through a pretty strong heat wave. Hearing, though, as in terms of territory conquered or lost or retaken or what have you, it sounds like there's some advancement being made in the Bakhmut region. Apparently some command and control structures, some defensive structures have been taken over by Ukrainian armed forces, and they've repelled Russians who tried to then, of course, regain that. So Bakhmut continues to be just this meat grinder, sadly, and with very little tactical advantage, but it's become this almost symbolic thing between the Russians and the Ukrainians. So that's kind of how things are going on with the war. But it's been a while since we talked, and we didn't speak last week when all this craziness was going on with Prigozhin. And that
was my next question. What the hell is going on there?
That is I'll tell you what. That is a major shift in the war. And what is going on there? Well, Prigozhin, the head of this Wagner mercenary group in Ukraine, who actually, again, was involved in Bakhmut and has done some of the fiercest fighting within Ukraine since the full-fledged war began last year. He has a real rivalry going on with the Minister of Defense, Shoigu, and the Chief of Staff, Gerasimov, because he claims that they are not supporting his mercenary group with ammunition and air support and things like that. And it's gotten so bad that there's some reports of open conflict between the two on the battlefield. So when by now I'm hoping that most folks were aware of what happened last week, and that was that Prigozhin decided to go into Russia, take over the command and control center for the entire Russian military operations in Ukraine in Rostov-on-Don. He got all the Ministry of Defense leaders that were available there, and he gave them a real dressing down. It is interesting to note, though, Tom, that he, throughout all of these tensions, never actually, with any real gravitas, made any threats towards Putin. So it's this idea in Russia of if the Tsar only knew, that the Tsar is above all of the dysfunction, and that it is his subordinates who are doing him wrong. So if only he had better lieutenants around him, is the mentality, and this is not just Prigozhin, this goes down through Russian history, that the Tsar would do better. But because the Tsar is above reproach, of course, it can't be his fault. That's kind of how the power structure is. Now, Prigozhin failed in his attempts to affect things within the Ministry of Defense, and he, through an agreement that is purported to have been done through Lukashenko in Belarus, President Lukashenko in Belarus, but I suspect Lukashenko was a little more than a telephone operator connecting various powers. The agreement was made that Prigozhin would go into exile just in nearby Belarus, which is really a satellite state of Russia. It's not really exile, but more like keeping him on a short leash just nearby and not on Russian territory where potentially he could be a threat. the latest update on this is we've only just heard within the last couple of hours that Lukashenko held a press conference in Minsk, the capital, and said Prigozhin is no longer here. He is in St. Petersburg. That is yet to be definitively confirmed the last time I checked, which was about 30 minutes ago.
Right.
But this is, Tom, what I've been saying to you for a long time now. My assessment of what is going on here with the Russians is that there is a coming power battle within the security apparatus, the technocrats, the guys who make the place run, the boyar class, as I like to say in a historical reference to Tsarist Russian Empire parlance, that there's going to be this tension between the two, or between all the various factions, rather, I should say. And then ultimately, we'll have to see how that shakes out with Putin himself. But, it's real risky here because, Russia is on the verge of losing Ukraine, which for centuries they've held as the cornerstone of their empire. And by lose it, I mean something that's in many ways already happened, in that the citizens of the country called Ukraine are not going to submit to Russian, authority.
Most of whom also speak Russian, by the way.
Most of whom speak Russian, and a lot of them, when this war began, were filling up Molotov cocktails, and they'll do it again. Yeah. So for any Russian leader to lose Ukraine, which he already has done, and then subsequently, potentially, we'll see how the summer offensive goes, he could potentially also lose Crimea. That'll be devastating to the leadership of Russia. It's all of their imperial holdings, that which defines them as Russians, as imperial Russians, which they still have that mindset, is going to be a real shakedown of their mentality. And we're going to have to see who survives it, but it's going to be tumultuous. And I think Prigozhin might be the first of many conflicts internally within Russia that may ultimately either bring down the Putin regime or drastically remake it.
So this is like the early cracks in the system.
Yeah, and you're seeing various power structures kind of square off in their various corners for the coming fight. And this is my this is my supposition here. This is my perspective, is that Yevgeny Prigozhin right now is not in prison because Putin doesn't want him in prison. Right. As a matter of fact, he draws breath because Putin does not want him killed. If Putin wanted him dead or in prison, he would be. So it is my belief that he is being kept. Putin has put him in this kind of exile right across the border in Belarus because he knows that there's going to be a power grab, that there will be factions fighting amongst themselves, and Putin wants to keep Prigozhin on a short leash as a pit bull that he can, no offense to real pit bulls, they're lovely dogs, but as a pit bull that he can turn against other power.
If he decides to let Shoigu fall on his sword or blame it all on somebody else close to him, then he brings Prigozhin in and says, this is the poor guy who got screwed by these people that I thought were on my side.
Right, who can easily be rehabilitated.
Now, the things that argue in favor of that kind of a scenario include the fact that, and my op-ed today, in fact, over at Hartmann Report, was all about how the Internet Research Agency was the main vehicle. Paul Manafort was conveying secret polling information.
He was giving Oppo.
Right, to Prigozhin. And Prigozhin was running the Internet Research Agency, that swung the 2016 election toward Trump. So he's got this incredible, intellectual infrastructure, internet-based intellectual infrastructure power. Now, I read an article last week saying that they were shutting down the IRA, but my guess is it'll just be reinvented, or maybe it's changing somehow in preparation for who knows. I mean, this internal battle in Russia, or maybe the U.S. Coming elections. So you got number one, that. You got number two, Prigozhin is running operations on behalf of Putin, extracting minerals in, I believe, 2 different African countries.
That's right.
And this is a major source of revenue for Putin, for his government, and also obviously for Prigozhin. Shoigu doesn't have any of that stuff.
No, Well, Shoigu also, I mean, Shoigu is not a military man. Shoigu ran the equivalent of Russia's FEMA. He's not a warrior. He's not a military man. And that's, neither for that matter is Prigozhin, but at least Prigozhin has been on the battlefield here in Ukraine. So he's got support back in Russia, not support that is more powerful than Vladimir Putin's. But he is, Shoigu and Gerasimov, it may very well come to a point, and not too soon in the future, not too far away in the future, when,
where they fall out of a window.
That's right. Or Putin decides that, Prigozhin was right. And, you guys are going to go. There's going to be a lot of brokering and a lot of horse trading before things are done.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the question is going to be, does Putin need Prigozhin more than Prigozhin needs Putin? And do Shoigu and Gerasimov have enough of a power base to protect themselves against the Wagner Group and all of the other things that Prigozhin has.
Other groups out there. There's the Kadyrovs, headed, the Radovan Kadyrov, who controls the Chechen militias. There's Patrushev, who is the head of the intelligence services inside the Kremlin. There are technocrats like deputy head of, deputy head of the cabinet, who used to be a prime minister, Sergei. I'm gapping on Kirillov, I believe. But anyhow, regardless, there are various power brokers within Moscow that are either going to create their own encampment and try and influence Putin that way, or they're going to fight amongst themselves, and whoever comes out the victor then gets to dictate to Putin. Or does Putin hold on to power and he gets those power brokers on side with him?
Right. And the big fear, Phil, is
exactly what Russia
does he decide to use those tactical nukes out of Belarus in Ukraine as a way of distracting from his problems? I mean, is that a concern?
I mean, using a nuke is a bell that you can't unring.
Yeah.
So, by the way.
Yeah.
Kirilenko.
Yeah. Phil, I'm
using a nuke, you can't really do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Always
Thanks
a pleasure.
a lot,
We'll talk next time. Much more coming out here.
You got it. Thanks, Phil. Phil Ittner. You find his video blog over at youtube.com. We'll be right back.